Well, hi, everyone. Great to see everybody today. Thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon when you could easily be at the beach. Before I kind of formally introduce myself, I would just love if, first, thanks, Kevin, for making this all happen. Kevin and I were just joking about, welcome to the most boring part of the whole thing, right? We're not going to be talking about math problems or reading strategies or wonderful students. We're going to be talking about how you run the darn business, right? So I would love it if folks are willing, take a moment and think about a headache you would like to solve this quarter, right? Here are some possibilities. Getting more clients. The pandemic has changed businesses for folks in our industry for sure. Some for the good, some for the better, or some, well, you can tell I'm an optimist. I suppose some for the worst, but I have to concentrate really hard to say that. Are you tracking your client information? Do you manage your clients, both parent or guardian and student? Maybe you have some other, members like school districts, et cetera. Are you running a grown-up business? One of the beautiful things about tutoring is you can kind of hang up your shingle pretty quickly and jump in. But often as businesses grow, there's a need to make that a little bit more formal, right? What about the money? Is that a pain for you to manage, or is it something else? And feel free to jot this down either in the chat, love to check that out, or if you want to pop on for a moment and share something that you're really concerned about, I'll be happy to keep that in mind as we go on. So yeah, feel free to share that information, at least take a moment to think about it. And if you're, say, a team lead here, thinking about your business, if you're a tutor working for an organization, what's the headache that you run into between you and, the folks that might make these decisions? So a little bit about me. I do co-own BODSAP Prep. We are an ACT, SAT company based in the Bay Area, and we do have a mission of essentially working with the top 20 percentile students. That's not because we're elitist jerks. We work with students, frankly, at every level individually, but BODSAP Prep is sort of aimed at those students because we do find industry-wide, a lot of times those top students don't have options that are quite as helpful for them. When I'm not doing that, I own and run DeVries Tutoring, and here I work on pretty much every age and every bit of subject. If I've got somebody that really wants help with their OChem college level course, well, I've got Robin and I'm going to send you that way. But, as far as kind of K to college calculus and most of the subjects in between, that's something that I do. I offer some educational consulting through that, and that's really, frankly, grown very organically. I don't have big plans to become a college counselor, although a few friends sort of tell me it's inevitable. I am doing UCI's program right now, and we'll finish my practicum this fall. And it is, sort of through that organic process and through that program that it's become a little bit more on my radar. I am the vice president and professional development director for an organization much like this one. We are Bay Area Tutoring Summit, and that's sort of a small camaraderie of mostly tutors in this area, although again, organically that's kind of spread out so that we're multi-state and even multinational. But not only do I kind of wear that executive hat, I am the person who does the development planning for, what professional training we want to offer for our members. And it is through that I'm often finding myself talking about this same kind of topic, how do you run your business? I'll just put a plug in really quickly for our BAT Scholars program. We basically take 2 to 3 students from the time they're at the end of their sophomore year through their first year of college and work with them to provide everything they need on a tutoring basis. It's a pretty amazing program. It's very comprehensive. It's small at this point and can grow with more participation. So if that's something that you're interested in, I recall, early days of being a tutor, one of my biggest frustrations was how difficult it was to find a way to volunteer and help students that might not be able to afford my regular services. And BAT Scholars is a really nice answer for those of us that are involved. And then, of course, there isn't a lot of time left over, but I'm married to my wonderful husband, Charlie. We are pet parents to an ever-growing furry family. And we're working on turning our traditional backyard into a sustainable food forest, an interest that I know Kevin shares as well. And let's be honest, it's not all green and organic. I also have a problem with pretty shoes. Besides being a tutor, I did fight it pretty hard because everyone told me, don't be a teacher, you won't make any money, you won't be respected. I'm not saying that they were wrong about that, but they didn't mention tutoring either. So I spent time as a river guide, running a whitewater rafting company, and then that kind of jump started my career into kind of business consultation. This was all great stuff, but I knew what I wanted to do was teach. And that's basically, how I got to my own tutoring company. Part of what I'm going to talk about with you today is just taking, your business to the next step. And that probably means something different to every single person in the room. I do feel that I bring some good experience from working with companies like Merrill Lynch, Marriott, and others. The big whitewater rafting company is kind of number 2 in the state. But really, I need to credit my parents. My dad, because he's an amazing artist, he does antique restoration and is an idiot about business. And my mom, who ran her own antiques business, and is kind of a business genius. So I got to grow up having my mom give my dad advice, frankly, over and over and over again. So I really couldn't help learning that. And if their dynamic wasn't what it was, I probably wouldn't be as confident in the business format that I have now. So, things that I do like billing very much have to do with mistakes my dad made over and over and over again, to where I was like, I will never, make that mistake again. So while at heart, I am very much a teacher, I do feel like I can give you some good suggestions around ways to organize your business. So here's kind of the funny thing. Business systems and educational professionals don't actually go together as well as you might expect. It's interesting that a bunch of people who spend tons of time helping their students organize and systematize their processes, like those around homework or note-taking, actually often struggle to do the same kind of organization within their own businesses. And I've kind of asked myself, why is that? Are we just a bunch of rogues, or are we overcorrecting because we've escaped the educational systems and all the red tape and know that those things can get in the way of what a student actually needs? Is it just a matter of, hey, I'm doing this because I loathe to do organizational stuff that other business realms really demand? But I would say, whatever your excuse, legitimate or not, you really owe it to yourself and to your clients and to your business in the long run to make sure that you have a positive relationship with business systems. So let's talk a little bit about business systems for educational professionals. As I mentioned, we teach our students to do things like organize their homework process, make sure they've got a plan for chunking a large project or breaking down a hard problem. But we also ask them to stay flexible about things like their problem-solving skills, or maybe even their mindset, rather than, getting stressed out about a problem. Let's check it out first. And if you don't know it, then sure, go ahead and get a little anxious. But, let's wait on that, right? So we've got those kind of dual jobs of stay flexible, but be organized. And that's really what business systems are about for those of us in this industry. We want to make sure that we can personalize the time that we spend with students. We want to make sure our client conversations really feel like we get what they're saying and we can address their issues. But we also need systems. A good example, my business partner, Justin, really enjoys writing curriculum. But here's the problem. In 12 hours working with us, our BODSAT students will pick up half the points they have left to a perfect score. And for most students, frankly, that's it. That's what they need. We also tend to prepare them to do a little bit more on their own. So the catch is, Justin likes to write curriculum, but we don't really need to keep rewriting that curriculum. And when we do a curriculum rewrite, reprint our materials, it's quite costly. So I think one of the things that educational professionals have to recognize is that, yeah, you've got to do these business systems, and they won't always be the things that you enjoy as much as some of the other things. But that's kind of the point. If we do them, then we can spend more time doing the things that we actually like to do. So I kind of alluded to this, right? But business systems are going to give us better business data, more automation, right? Better integration with the systems we use. And when we do those things, we actually get more time to talk to our students, our clients, the people that send clients to us, the colleagues that we work with, right? So if we systematize the things that we can, we actually end up getting to do more of the things that we like. This kind of takes me to a conversation I had with a colleague. He's based in San Francisco, and it's not unheard of rates to be 300, 500, even 750, $1,000 an hour in the San Francisco Bay Area. Don't just move yet. Well, as Kevin just said, hey, what's the water situation out there? We're okay, but we'll see, right? And yeah, housing prices are, right in line with those rates. But I was having this conversation with a colleague who's out there, and he was telling me, it's a few years ago now, but just how amazing Yelp was for his business. So, being a little business nerd that I am, I started asking him, well, okay, how much money are you getting from Yelp? Okay, well, do you have a sense, like, are your Yelp customers a little bit more sensitive to your rates than, say, people that are coming to you from, your closest college counseling colleague? That's a good question. Well, okay, interesting. If those people on Yelp are fine and they're not intimidated by a big rate up front, do they end up working with you long term? In other words, do they come for a single college counseling session, or, do they end up working with you for 6 months or a year? All good questions, right? But the catch is he couldn't really answer those pieces. And, my take on Yelp kind of early in the process, and I'm sure there are people out there using it to good advantage, but in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Northern California, there are a lot of tutors. So in terms of distinguishing yourself on Yelp, you can run a campaign of really maximizing those 5-star ratings. That, of course, takes time. Or you might find that you ignore it entirely and kind of, let it look like, hey, this is something they don't use. But these are kind of questions that you've got to be thinking about, right? It's not, oh, hey, Yelp is great for Scott, it's great for me. It's, is Yelp great for Scott? In what ways? And are those ways reflective of things that are going to benefit my business, right? And I think a good analogy here is, students will come to you and say, oh, well, I've taken the ACT and the SAT, but I liked the ACT more, or I felt better about the SAT. But we know you need to sit down with those scores, look at how those scores compare on an actual, chart that's going to compare scores. And then we need to ask questions like, well, why did you feel better? Because if you felt better about the ACT because you took it later in your junior year and you didn't really take the SAT on a day when you were feeling very good, then that's great information. And it tells us we need to make sure you have those same kind of positive experiences lined up going into your ACT or SAT, but it doesn't actually tell us about the test, right? So we need to make sure that we have our business systems and where we're spending our time aligned with things that really make sense for us. I am able, through my client management software, to track where our clients for BODSAT come from. And 55% of our clients come from either private or school college counselors. Another 40% come from friends or siblings, referrals from friends, siblings of students that have already worked with us. So between spending my time building a Yelp campaign and making sure my current clients are happy, know our names, know how to get in touch with us, know how to refer to us, you get a sense that it's smarter for me and my business to spend time thinking about those referrals, right? It's worth mentioning too that there is a certain component here that's self-fulfilling. So if you know me to be someone who really nurtures my relationships with college counselors, well, it's no surprise to you that college counselors refer their students to me, right? But what's interesting is I think you also want to consider why you would go one direction or another with, say, your marketing or a particular business system. Is that, say, in the area of marketing, when I search BODSAT prep ACT sitting at a computer in my neighborhood where my business address is, right, I am the first person that comes up in Google. The catch is that's off the page because it's right under the 3 ads from Prep Expert, Princeton, and C2. And frankly, I don't want to compete with their marketing budget, right? But I'm happy and probably capable to win the times when I compete with them talking directly to college counselors that I can connect with. So business systems, what the heck are we talking about here, right? You can probably, again, Google this and get anything from a list of 5 to 10 to 15 core systems. Maybe it's 8, right? But the main systems I'm thinking about for today are your marketing and sales, right? And I'll mention that I'm not saying advertising, right? To me, ads are when you throw your money and name out of the world and you kind of cross your fingers that you catch something, versus marketing where you make sure you are putting your services in front of people who are likely to use them, right? And there are ways to do that that are, in my opinion, better than, crossing your fingers and hoping you bought the right AdWords someplace. This marketing and sales process is very much about that conversion process, taking someone that knows about you and helping them become a client if that's the right fit. Customer relationship management, you'll hear CRM, right? It's just a fancy way of saying, do you have a way of intentionally managing your clients? And frankly, if you don't, right, recognize that you're probably hurting your business in some way. As far as the client experience and process, I do think we're in an interesting industry in the sense that we have 2 clients in most cases, the one paying and the student right in front of us. And that's, certainly not true if you're working with GMAT and GRE students, they may be financing it themselves, but very often there is a financial party and the party that we work most directly with. So one of the complications there for that client experience is the student might have a great experience with you, but the teacher doesn't update a grade in the grading system, and the parent is still upset the grade is what it is, right? So part of this client experience is managing the connections that, parent and student and school district, et cetera, have, right? I often feel like the college counselors that I work with are also part of that client pool, right? If the student has a really off or really great experience, I want to make sure that I've got a process to make sure that information gets to them. In terms of operations, I'm really just thinking about things that we're going to do to run our business on a regular basis, right? And the accounting and finances is very much about, is my money being managed in a grown-up, helpful way? So I don't know if any of you have checked out the newest Lost in Space. I forget if it's, I think, a Netflix piece. The robot has gotten an upgrade, but it's not just the robot. Maureen Robinson is no longer just a concerned mom running around trying to figure out what the kids are doing. She's actually a homeschooling mom, captain, very capable, right? PhD in engineering, safety expert, space explorer, and no kidding, she's a rocket scientist, right? And while she has all of those hats that she wears, there's an expression that she uses throughout the series that I think is relevant with whether you're off planet or on, right? One problem at a time. So I will definitely say there are solutions like a good database for your clients that will solve multiple problems. But I would say that in the name of not getting overwhelmed today, really, as we talk about these things, keep thinking back to that one headache that you'd like to solve this quarter and recognize this great phrase, one problem at a time. And we will kind of spend a little time at the end too, talking about, okay, there are 3 headaches I'd like to solve. How do I prioritize those? So marketing and sales, right? Our big goal here, as you can see on the screen, right, is getting that constant stream of people ready to buy what you're offering, okay? So I've already mentioned a little bit that idea of nurturing the sources that are coming your way, right? And of course, point number 2, having a client management system is going to help know where you do that, right? But once you've made some connections and, you absolutely may have a good off the hip sense of where most of your clients are coming from, think about how you can support this part of your process in a systematic way by spending money and time that's going to matter, right? So for example, I do a big campaign in the fall around Thanksgiving for BODSAT, where we just send out some thank you notes. Absolutely, the mailing label has all the information you need if you want to get a hold of it, get a hold of us. But the message is clear. Hey, we talk to our students about being grateful for the opportunities they have to better themselves. We're grateful for you letting us work with you. And I do get people that will call, a week, a month, a couple of months after that I haven't heard from for a while. And, I don't necessarily say, oh, hey, did you get our thank you note? But there's a pretty clear, like, yep, I haven't talked to this person and they're kind of calling out of the blue. And I'll bet that had something to do with it. Right. And that's something that, I can do and personalize in a way that a bigger organization probably can't. I think it's important for us to recognize, we are a service business and we need to really make sure that we're streamlining our marketing and sales in a way that helps us reach the amount of people we want and that it helps us get booked in a way that we like. I think if you're doing this well, you can really manage some of the seasonality. And, I have colleagues that love the seasonality of, say, test prep, where they, want an opportunity to, really take some time off, do some traveling. And other folks who sort of complain about the seasonality and want to see that ironed out, right? So one of the nice things here is you can time your marketing campaigns in a way that do the things that you want to do. And yes, we're getting a little intervention from Wally. Come. Pardon me. I didn't
that was
factor in.
flowing. So that was flowing so well. It's funny too, because I have a dog in the background here, which you can't hear, but you were just rocking, and then Wally comes in and blows the whole thing up. It's just life. But if you're a dog lover, you forgive things like this, right?
Humorously, I didn't remember to systematize the dogs. I sort of knew that was coming, but you do that thing when you're presenting, like, do I sort of mention that this is about to erupt, or do we just see if fate swings them towards the other window? So apologize there for the interruption, folks. That was Wallace and Gromit, brought to you by Amazon Delivery. One of the other nice things that I think about having a really good streamlined process for your marketing and sales is that you also know when to turn a client away. I sort of joke that if I get a calculus student before March, I'm all in. And after March, forget it. Because if they're coming from any one of the 20 different schools that I work with, probably more, before March, I've got a little extra time. We can do everything we need to do. After March, I'm referring you to Wes because I don't want to be bothered with figuring out what your teacher has covered this year. I'm in the middle of gearing up with other students for APs, right? So it allows me to take on work that I like and enjoy, and that is not, a bunch of kind of headachy time for me outside of paying hours. And it allows me to, pay forward some karma over to my dear friend Wes and say, hey, you teach all calculus all the time. If you could talk to this family, right? They're ready to go and they need your help 5 days a week this week, right? So as Kevin said, he likes to work on kind of that karma referral process. And I think a good marketing sales process really nurtures that. In terms of your good old CRM, right? Our goal here is to organize and store customer data, right? In a way that I think is intentional and in a way that's helpful for you. The key word is definitely relationship. And I think it's very easy, again, for us as educators to kind of, check in when something goes well or check in if we're worried. But, for example, do we have a regular system of checking in with our families? Do we need one? I'll talk a little bit more later here about the system that I use and, frankly, the why of that, right? But I think one of the pieces here that people need to recognize is that just because a family has become a client, it doesn't mean that your customer relationship management should stop, right? That frankly is kind of just a step past the beginning. By doing this well, I've been able to expand my business pretty darn naturally to work with more graduate students. And, frankly, since I work with all ages, it's nice to periodically work with someone in their 20s. So I think that, if this is done well in a way that's helpful for you, it really lets you have more and more control over a lot of parts of your day that are sort of those headache-inducing pieces, right? I'll also mention, you're going to hear me conflate this customer relationship management with the client process, because frankly, if you're managing your clients with a customer relationship management component, they're just about one and the same thing. And I think that's actually one of the nice pieces. When I've got this going right, I don't have to try to remember to do things, right? Those things are basically handed to me from my system. And if I can't remember where someone is, I can check in and get that information. If somebody calls me out of the blue and I want to pick up because I haven't heard from them in a while, I called twice and I can tell they're stressed out, right? I can pick up that call at the park with my dogs and in seconds have everything I need to know in front of me. So that's, kind of an important piece for the way that I do business. And I think, just evaluating, really what you're looking at here is how are you going to nurture those relationships in a genuine way, one that is helpful to you, to the clients, and one that is strategic. So that takes us to this related process of client experience. And basically here, we want to make sure that we are delivering what we promise, right? Making sure that both you and your client know that you did. When I'm done working with a BODSAT student, I normally stay in touch with them at least until they have their test scores back. In most cases, I'm making sure I, know when they're kind of done with their college app process, when they start to hear back from schools, when they actually decide. And frankly, I invite them to LinkedIn, as they're heading off to college, right? But it's very easy to kind of lose the parent in that process. So, we definitely have built in components that make sure we're checking with families. In that process, I generally mail, if I can call, I call. When I'm swamped, I email and just say to the parents, hey, I don't know if you remember, but this is where your daughter started. This is where she ended. This is what kind of change that made. Here are maybe some of the percentiles, right? And if there's something else significant to say about that student or the experience. And it's amazing how many times parents go, whoa, I didn't really put that all together, right? Why? Because this isn't their business, it's mine. What I've done there is, sort of take a parent that's happy and made them a referrer or a potential referrer, right? And I also probably have, made them feel a little bit better about the time, the money, the headaches they had, convincing their student to organize this, that, or the other thing along the way. So, that can be a really promising process. In those communications, I basically ask for feedback. And it's funny because I'll ask for feedback and parents will say, let me know if I can give a reference for you. Let me know if I can write you something as a testimonial. So it's, it's really interesting. It's this very genuine process, but that does give me information that I can use as far as positive and negative feedback. But also, parents themselves will take another step. College counselors will, be especially appreciative. And it's funny, often when I do these check-ins with a college counselor, the next month they send 4 students, right? I've had other tutors say, oh, referral sources can be so fickle. It's not about being fickle, right? You put your name in somebody's head and you just make it easier for them to connect with you. It's not that they didn't love you, didn't remember you, didn't know you, right? But it's all about that ease, right? They're running this small business in most cases themselves, or, maybe they're not running a small business, they're running the school or the school district. So just recognizing that managing that whole process, beginning to end, and maybe even a little after can be really helpful. I think this is also particularly important when you know that there's a miss. I'm thinking of a student that, came to me as a junior. She's very bright, but she's got an undiagnosed learning difference. How can I tell? Because I'm working with her in a time situation that she doesn't really have to face at school. And how else can I tell there's something going on? Well, I can barely see her face for her hood being down over her head, right? Kind of long story short, we put a pin in things as I communicated with the parents and said, hey, look, we're going to hit this timing wall. It's no matter what test we're taking. She's going to hit this timing wall when she heads off to college and is taking bubble tests those first few years, especially. I think we need to see if there's something going on here and if there's something that we can do. And, basically what am I saying? I can't deliver on what I promised you, but I'm providing value that has been able to be overlooked in the school setting because she can stay up until 2 in the morning and compensate. when she isn't in that time situation, right? That client ultimately had me work with every one of her 4 children, and is still a good friend and referrer now. So I think it's not just, hey, the kid had a good session. It's really recognizing that whole process. Another piece here that I'll mention is, I kind of mentioned that, parents won't put it all together. Parents know a number that they got on a score, a letter that they got on a grade, whether or not the kid has a note from the teacher, right? They don't necessarily note things like this student is now more confident. You might not see it more confident, but they tried a problem they would have skipped another day, right? So I think it's really on us to communicate some of those things. One, because it's great for parent and even student alike. Hey, did you realize you tried that problem because the other day you wanted to skip it? But that you're doing a real service to your business when you can show your excellence by talking about more of the things that parents might not know, right? And along with that is parents know things like the number and whether or not you called them back or emailed them in a timely way. So recognize, what parents do know about and make sure you can communicate with them in a way that is really helpful. There I would just say, like, I text a lot. My students all tend to text with me, and it's frankly easier for me to text when I'm in a session and the student is doing a problem than a lot of other forms of communication. Certainly can't pick up the phone, right? So I make a point of telling parents, hey, if you need something quickly, text me. Even if it's, I need you to read a long email, text me to tell me that, because I want to prioritize the information that you need and your process through this experience, and let me make it as easy for you to do that. On to operations. This is kind of just coming down to running your business in an efficient way, right? You can ask yourself things like, how likely is it that I'll ever miss a session or maybe double book myself, right? What's my standard for getting back to a client, right? Does the way I run my business compete with someone like Princeton Review that has someone picking up the 800 number 24/7, right? And if it doesn't or can't, what are ways that I'm going to compensate for that, right? To make it that much easier to see the benefit of working with me versus some big nameless, faceless, organization, right? Another really important question to ask yourself here is, who keeps you accountable, right? When you own your own business, it's very important to keep sliding that thing you don't want to do to the side, right? So if this is an area that's really challenging for you, like, get it systematized, right? If you've got a good structure, then something else can be monitoring this process for you. And I think one thing we all have to recognize as, small and medium businesses is that the things we don't know about are very often the biggest problems, right? An unhappy customer or a, client that didn't get a call back that's now calling your competitor and maybe bad mouthing you, so that if they were going to get busy and maybe recommend you because, hey, you have an okay relationship, now they feel bad and they don't want to do that because they've heard you're not picking up your phone, right? So, recognizing that this operational piece is important in the ways you can see, but maybe more important in the ways you might miss or not see things. And that takes us to the money, right? There's definitely the piece of just simply having a good accounting system, making sure that you're billing and collecting funds in an appropriate way. But I want small business owners to make sure they're thinking about things that are a little bit higher level, right? Bookkeeping, payroll, if you've got people that work either with you or for you, your tax filing process, your invoicing clients. Kevin and I have talked, like, what's your ROI, right? And people are going, what's your return on your investment, right? And people are going like, what do you mean, what I have in my 401k? I mean, like, is it worth it for you to buy a laptop now? Should you buy that by December 31st and have the expense in this business year? Or would you be wise to make it that business decision such that you buy it on January 1st, because you're going to need a bigger deduction next year with business taking off the way that it is, right? How might you even get started about this? Back to that idea of having this information, because my mom's a business genius and my dad is an artist, my dad, frequently would do reproduction furniture, and, he's done work for named museums, worked on Thomas Jefferson's desk that had been damaged in a fire while on loan to a smaller museum. And very often when he is doing his work, he needs to purchase materials up front, right? Similarly, often if I'm working with a student at a new school, I need to get a hold of a few textbooks, right? Or get some online service or something, right? So we do have those outlays before we're sort of collecting, say, from the time that we work with a family or a student, right? And I heard my mom time and time again say, why don't you get a deposit on this, right? I mean, your typical serviceman or service person will take a deposit. Hey, we like $100 before we send this service person out to your location, right? And here my dad is doing, $1,000 projects of amazing form where he's going to make a big outlay of getting the right tool or, just piles of wood to do it. And he would routinely not get that deposit, right? So when I started my small business where I was going, person to person in my little truck to do tutoring at people's homes, I would charge on the first day for the 2 weeks of sessions that I was going to have with that student. And that absolutely made it. So I was never waiting on anyone to pay me. I could kind of trust my own integrity that if the family gave me appropriate notice, I would just let a session be, accounted for in the next billing cycle, kept that in a book about this big with a, client initials at the top. So no one knew who was who. Easiest thing in the world. Took me, a moment at the beginning of every 2 weeks where I would say, thank you for giving me check number, etc. Right. And it just, I put a new book out each year, kept it in my planner, easy peasy. Right. So I think the thing is, that has, influenced the way that we do things at BODSAT Prep. We have clients pay us upfront. And if a client needs to make payments, well, that's systematized. So that's not a big deal either. And because we have payment up front, if we need to buy a big batch of binders or something like that, we're not waiting for someone's check to come in to do that. So, while it probably sounds a little bit like I'm advocating for that, what I'm really saying is that's a system that works really well and gets rid of a lot of headaches we might otherwise be having. So that's the kind of thing you want to be thinking about when it kind of comes down to this money component. So talk a little bit about my favorite system, right? And it's probably more interesting to actually know how we got there. So when I joined BODSAT, I was kind of bringing our ACT program along, and Justin and another partner were kind of doing the occasional seminar, and we were, trying to take things to a little bit, higher level. And a friend of a friend was writing a client management piece in Excel for us. And after about 2 years, where it got to the point that neither of the original partners could talk to this person anymore, and that was all falling to me. And I was driving to Berkeley to have those conversations and spending hours doing it. And things weren't really changing. I sort of threw up my hands and was like, okay, cool. Well, I get that this is all super personalized. And, we called it like the captain's chair or something awesome and Star Trek-y. Like, that's fantastic, but it wasn't doing what we needed to do. It was having problems because there was one person basically writing it, so to speak. I couldn't necessarily get a hold of her every time that there was a problem. She went on vacation. We just kind of crossed our fingers and switched to paper when the thing wasn't working. And as I went looking for another solution, I definitely had the ability to look at what we've been spending for the last 2 years on trying to get this thing just right. And really my big thing was I've got a zero tolerance for downtime. I am willing to spend probably 10% of our annual revenue if I never need to drive to Berkeley to talk about my database again, right? I want a solution that lets me focus on my time with students, right? Not what the database is doing today, right? Because I was planning to use it to do things like email clients at appropriate times, I was willing to spend a little bit more than, say, just something that I had a list of names. If I could, keep things like test date and when a student was, graduating, it would give me a little bit of our marketing. So I was willing to spend a little bit of our marketing budget on that. It turned out that the right system for us is Salesforce. And one of the things that is kind of critical is we don't always bill just hourly. And many of the like systems that are out there only bill hourly, or you can sort of modify how you bill so that it is a, weekly or monthly payment. But kind of part of our thought process around kind of elevating the profession is every minute of mine doesn't have to be exactly connected to a moment in time, right? So I wanted to kind of free us up from that moment to moment billing. Salesforce allows us to do that. Salesforce is here in San Francisco. So, there's sort of like an office if you ever really needed that. I've not needed that yet. But, there's sort of some similar culture of, that company and our company, because, hey, we're all here in the Silicon, area. So that was the right decision for us, right? A couple other things, we were able to work with our web guy to have it nest with our billing. I can see that client status. I've got, taking a diagnostic test, reviewing the diagnostic report, waiting for me to score it in between, right? Considering a program, in a program, waiting for test scores, and on, right? And that is really helpful. It allows me to manage more students and not to hold all that information in my working memory. It lets me task internally. So, those of us at the organization, we can send each other, quick action items. I can even send that action item to myself. So kind of having a to-do list that's built in and catered and kind of designed around our students is really helpful. And, as I mentioned, kind of facilitates all these other things. I absolutely have looked at TutorBird with some of my colleagues that use it. And I think, especially for for businesses billing on an hourly basis, is really kind of beautiful. It is so much more affordable. And, while I'm comfortable kind of spending about 4% of our annual revenue for the database, Salesforce does that for us. That might not be the case for others. And again, that kind of has to do with where you're located and, what you're charging, et cetera, your billing structure. But that, kind of, I think the thing there is I needed like the organization to not change, to not be bought up. So I looked at Salesforce, Zoho, and a couple of others. I frankly don't think TutorBird was quite born, or if it was, maybe I didn't, I wasn't coming across it at the time. But all of these have really good components. And if you're thinking about, managing a few of these things that I'm talking about, take some time, right? Again, I would say don't overdo that. Give yourself a month or something to take a look at these. Talk to a few friends that are using the different systems. I've definitely shown Salesforce off to colleagues, and try to find a system that is right for you. And then sort of, as I say to students, like, ultimately, once you do pick that college, right, what matters then is make that system work for you. So, go into it with a, an open mind, recognizing maybe a few things that it doesn't do exactly like you would do on paper, but it should be able to do them in a way that is favorable for you. One thing I will also mention here is I think sometimes small business people can be a little penny wise, pound foolish. When I was running the whitewater rafting reservation office, we had an ancient copier, and I watched our owner, who was in his 70s, come in to use the copier one day. And he's this hulking guy. He basically started the rafting company when he injured himself. By the way, he was like a Mr. Universe at one point, right? And he got a lower body injury, so he was looking for something to do just upper body. Hey, row some rivers, right? And they were like out there, fighting with the gold miners. Like, I'm not even kidding. Back in the day, right? But what does he do now? He comes in and copies our permits. So the machine's jamming up, and I watch the person sitting closest to the machine get up and start to help him. Well, that person's a little older and not quite as tech savvy. So, a few minutes later, another one of my employees is helping to use the copier, right? So I now have 3 people on the copier. 2 of them are supposed to be on the phone, right? So they're not doing sales, they're supporting this. I'm probably spending $100 an hour right now to make photocopies, right? A new copier is $2,000. So I think that you have to recognize, like, how often is that going to happen? Oh, right. It's going to happen every month when he comes in to do this kind of, permit work. And by the way, that's not the only time this thing is going to have to work. So take some time to think about your systems and, I would say don't be afraid to push your budget a little bit, right? Initially, spending the money that we spent for Salesforce was definitely a little scary. It turned out it was going to be less than what we were spending when I started adding up all this personalized work we were getting. But in the long run, it's a very small part of my budget, and it's like completely invaluable. So just kind of circling back here, because I want to make sure we save about 10 minutes for questions. Business systems and you, right? Think about what it is that you really want, and think about how you would prioritize these kind of systems, right? These are the kind of things that we're talking about. I'm just going to give that moment of silence for a moment. Take a look at these and think, which one of these is maybe most pressing or most lacking for you. And as you think about that, if you would like to add to the chat the thing that is your biggest headache, I'm definitely happy to see those pop up.
I just have a question. What were you using a CRM before you started using Salesforce? So did you have like a comparison in your head?
Yeah, so we had a gigantic workbook within Excel that was basically different tabbed pages focusing, you're sort of acting as different components of your client management piece. So
Gotcha.
there was essentially a gigantic page with all of our client data. Then there was, say, a page where we could pull a report to see, who all is preparing for the August SAT, right? There was, kind of another page where things were sorted in a different way, and, quite a bit of coding in the workbook and behind, kind of in the back end, that we're trying to do that work. Now, once you've got a priority in mind, let me, give you some suggestions to think about for that one thing you want to work on here, right? I will just write up, right? I should probably pause and confess. I use a paper calendar. I like look for it and realize, oh, I moved into the office to be able to stand up to have this talk, and I'm going to panic, right? Because I can't see my calendar, but I use a paper calendar. Why? Because I'm a control freak and I really like paper products, right? However, that component, right, that you cannot argue that that's pretty low tech or not especially systematized, right? It's certainly systematized for me, but probably no one else could read it. That is what works for me at that level. I don't actually, use a calendar formula to do my sessions. And you know what? I'll bet that causes me some confusion, or a student a confusion, right? Periodically, because it's not just instantly in their calendar. But it also keeps me from having the headache of trying to work with everybody else who has different calendars. And it gives me a way to kind of at the end of a month, check in with what's in my planner that actually happened with, anything that I want to check with our more formal system. So, the point here is not go spend $1 billion on different, web client, et cetera, this, that, and the other, right? But to find a blend of systems that work best for you, right? Like I said, Kevin has had TutorBird. They're part of the conference here. I think if I were looking at Salesforce and TutorBird tomorrow, I would definitely have a different thought process around which one made more sense than when I was tearing my hair out, just freaking out about my old way of trying to do this, right? But check them out, check out the demo. Like, I definitely think they check an awful lot of the boxes for a typical, kind of tutoring style business, right? But think about, like, with the marketing and sales, rather than having, say, MailChimp and your Gmail and your, right, think about, are there ways that you can kind of connect those, right? Take a look at the customer relationship management offerings that are out there. There's nothing wrong with an Excel spreadsheet, right? If you're a college counselor and you see 10 kids a year, like you probably don't need anything else but an Excel spreadsheet, right? Maybe you need a ledger, right? So just really consider kind of the size and scope. And also, do you want something that can do multiple functions on this checklist, right? For operations, honestly, Gmail and what it offers does an awful lot with pretty much a zero cost, right? I've also been kind of impressed by Calendly. I have some colleagues that'll say like, oh, hey, just go to my page and sign up. I like that. I don't want that because I like to be able to look at my calendar and make suggestions for a client versus having to say have 3 slots on a day where the first and the last slot gets booked up. And honestly, I haven't looked at these things in a while. I'll bet there's some ways to like make that happen in a calendar app as well. Accounting and finance, this definitely feels like there's great information out there. It doesn't really need to be catered to the tutoring profession because billing is pretty much the same in these kind of service industries. So and I would also say don't overlook private professionals. Talk to your colleagues. If they've got a great accountant, that's a great place to start. We use an accountant for BODSAT on kind of a monthly basis. It's probably $20 because it's no longer the guy that I started working with years ago. It's his, trained 3-tier down kind of person, but does everything I need to do. They communicate directly with our tax accountant, and at all the right times, I get a couple of questions and the paperwork I need. It's also worth mentioning here that doing some of this stuff, I think, for yourself is some of the most risky stuff to do. It's easy to make a mistake doing your taxes or something like that. So incorporating a service or professional at that phase, I think, is a really smart decision because it also gives you a little bit of cover. You want to be an expert, middle school level reading specialist and not a tax accountant. Get that professional involved and give yourself a little protection and coverage. So as I said, kind of wrapping up here, I'm a teacher. Here's your homework, right? Again, feel free to add to the chat if this is something, you want someplace to kind of memorialize this, but think about what you'll systemize this quarter, right? Who will do it? It could be you, could be someone else. When, right? I say this quarter because I want people to try to set shorter goals. So, maybe your first goal is I'm going to look at the CRMs that are out there for the next month. I'm going to look at one a week, right?